The wind carried a strange stillness as the truck rumbled through the barren landscape of West Texas. The sun, unforgiving and heavy, cast long shadows across the red dirt roads. In the back of the truck, Anna Muller sat silently, her hands trembling. She had heard the rumors, the stories of what awaited prisoners like her in this foreign land. But nothing could prepare her for the truth. Nothing could prepare her for the man who would change everything. Her eyes, dull from weeks of exhaustion, glanced up as the truck came to a halt. The door opened, and a blast of dry heat greeted her. She stepped down, her legs stiff from the long journey, her ankles still bound by chains. She had been trained to expect cruelty, to fear the worst, but what she saw before her shattered everything she knew. The guards, silent and unreadable, herded her and the other prisoners into a line, the clinking of chains echoing in the silence. But it wasn't the guards that caught her attention. It was him, a man standing off to the side, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite place. His uniform was different from the others, more worn, more lived in. He had the kind of presence that made the air feel different, heavier, but in a way that didn't scare her. His eyes, though, were what struck her most. There was something there, something she didn't expect from a soldier. He didn't look at her with the disdain she had grown used to, but with curiosity, perhaps even pity. His name, she would soon learn, was John Marshall, a name she would never forget. As the others were processed, John remained at the edge, his gaze lingering on Anna, then quickly looking away when their eyes met. She couldn't understand why. She had been told to expect hatred, to expect to be treated like an animal. But this man, he seemed different. Something about him, the way he looked at her, made her feel seen, in a way that she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just the way he stared, though. It was the small gesture that followed. As the line moved forward, John stepped toward Anna, offering her a small piece of bread, wrapped in a piece of cloth. She hesitated, unsure whether to take it. She had been warned, conditioned, to distrust everything. But his silent gaze, the faintest flicker of kindness in his eyes, made her hand tremble as she reached out. He watched her take it, then, without saying a word, walked away. His simple act of kindness, so small, so unremarkable to him, was something she couldn't comprehend. How could someone like him, a soldier of the enemy, offer anything but cruelty? She took a bite, her body starved and aching, and for a moment, everything faded away. The tension, the fear, the war, none of it mattered. For just a moment, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different here. As the days went on, Anna found herself looking forward to the rare moments when she would see John. His quiet presence had become a strange comfort amidst the chaos of the camp. It wasn't just the food, the small gestures, or the rare words of kindness he offered. It was the way he made her feel like she wasn't invisible, that there was more to her than just the uniform she wore, the chains that bound her, and the sorrow she carried. The routine of the camp was brutal, but John's presence gave her something to hold on to, a faint glimmer of humanity amidst the harshness. One morning, Anna was walking towards the work area, her body still weak from days of labor under the hot Texas sun, when she saw him again. He was standing at the edge of the compound, watching her. His gaze was steady, but this time, there was something different in his eyes, a kind of quiet determination. "You look tired," he said softly as she approached. Anna nodded. It had been weeks since she had felt rested. The weight of captivity, the labor, and the constant fear had worn her down. But she couldn't tell him that. Not in those simple words. "It's been hard," she said instead, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," John replied. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. "I wish there was more I could do. But we have to keep going. For now, it's the only thing we can do." His words hung in the air, heavy with a shared understanding. There was no guarantee of freedom, no certainty that the war would end anytime soon. And yet, somehow, in this small moment, they both understood that survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about holding on to something, anything, that could make the pain bearable. "I'll make sure you have something more to eat later," he added, his voice low. "It's not much, but I'll bring it to you when I can." Anna looked at him, surprised by the sincerity in his words. She wasn't used to people doing things for her without expecting something in return. But John had no agenda. His kindness wasn't transactional. He was offering something pure, something that felt rare in the world they now inhabited. "Thank you," she said quietly, meeting his gaze for the first time in days. He nodded, then walked away, leaving her standing there, feeling the weight of his words linger in her chest. Later that afternoon, John returned, just as he promised. He handed her a small package wrapped in cloth, more bread, some fruit, and a small piece of cheese. It wasn't much, but to Anna, it felt like a lifeline. She had learned to appreciate the smallest of things in the camp, and this simple act of kindness was a gift she would hold on to. "I can't stay long," John said, glancing around to make sure no one was watching. "But I wanted to make sure you're all right. I know it's hard, but we're going to get through this." His words were filled with a quiet strength, and for the first time in a long while, Anna allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could. "I don't know how long this will last," Anna said, her voice barely a whisper. "But I can't help feeling like I've already lost so much." John looked at her, his expression softening. "I understand. We've all lost something. But that doesn't mean we have to lose everything." His words were simple, but they carried a weight that Anna felt deep within her. She had lost so much, her family, her home, her sense of security. But in this moment, as she looked at John, she realized that she didn't have to lose the one thing that still mattered: hope. Hope that, somehow, in the midst of all this destruction, there could be a future. A future where she wasn't just a prisoner, but a person again. John's eyes met hers for a brief moment, and she saw something there, a kind of quiet promise, a shared understanding that spoke louder than any words could. Without saying another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the distance. But Anna remained there, her heart heavy with emotion. She had always thought of herself as a survivor, someone who could endure anything. But now, for the first time, she felt something else, a flicker of possibility, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, there was something worth fighting for. The days continued to pass in a blur, but Anna's thoughts often returned to John, to the quiet moments they had shared. Each time he appeared, it felt like a small reminder that there was still good in the world, even in the darkest of times. And though the future remained uncertain, Anna held on to that small, fragile hope. Because sometimes, that was all you needed to keep going. Weeks had passed since that moment by the fence, but Anna found that the feeling of hope John had given her didn't fade as quickly as everything else in her life had. It remained with her, a quiet presence that whispered to her during the moments of silence between the relentless days of work. She noticed the little things, how the sun seemed just a little warmer, how the days didn't drag as much. It was a small comfort in a place where everything was cold and harsh. But she wasn't the only one who had changed. John had become different too. The brief moments they shared were growing more frequent, though still wrapped in secrecy. She caught glimpses of him as he passed, his eyes searching the camp, always making sure no one was watching. There was a growing bond between them, though neither of them had dared to name it yet. They shared only small, fleeting moments, words exchanged in the quiet corners of the camp, a smile here, a brief touch there, but they spoke volumes. One afternoon, as Anna was working in the garden area, she looked up and saw him standing by the fence again, watching her. This time, there was something different in his gaze. It was no longer just curiosity or pity. There was understanding, and something deeper, something that Anna didn't know how to explain. She found herself walking toward him before she had a chance to think it through. The air was warm, thick with the summer heat, and the sound of crickets filled the silence between them. "I've been thinking about what you said," Anna began, her voice soft, unsure if she was making sense. John's eyes met hers, and he nodded slowly, waiting for her to continue. "About survival. About holding on," she said. She had never spoken to anyone this openly, not since before the war had torn her life apart. She hadn't even realized how much she needed to say these things until now. John looked at her with the kind of intensity that made her heart race. "I know it's hard," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But you're stronger than you know. We all are." Anna looked down at her hands, the dirt on her fingers reminding her of how far she had fallen from the life she once knew. "I don't know if I believe that anymore," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly. "It feels like I've lost everything." John stepped a little closer, his presence steady and comforting. "You haven't lost everything, Anna. Not yet. As long as we're alive, we can still find a way to make it through." His words, simple as they were, felt like a lifeline being thrown to her. She didn't know if they could make it, but in that moment, she wanted to believe him. The tension between them was palpable, and for the first time, Anna felt like she wasn't just surviving. She was living, even if only for a brief moment. "Thank you," she said quietly, unsure of how else to express the gratitude she felt for the small moments of kindness he had given her. John nodded, his gaze softening. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." But Anna knew it was more than that. It wasn't just about giving food or offering comfort. It was about seeing her, truly seeing her, in a way that no one else had in a long time. "I have to go," John said after a few moments, his voice returning to its usual quiet tone. "They'll be looking for me." Anna watched him as he turned to leave, a part of her aching at the thought of their brief encounter ending. But before he walked away, John looked back at her, his expression filled with something Anna couldn't quite place. "I'll see you again," he said softly, the promise in his words hanging in the air. Between them, Anna nodded, a small but hopeful smile tugging at her lips. "I'll be here," she replied. And in that moment, with the sun setting low in the sky and the quiet hum of the camp surrounding them, Anna believed him. As the days turned into weeks, Anna found herself waiting for those moments with John, those small glimpses of kindness that made the rest of the days bearable. They never spoke of what was growing between them. There were no grand declarations, no promises made. But each time they met, each small gesture, made Anna feel something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She didn't know what the future would bring or when she would be free, but for the first time since the war had taken everything from her, she felt like she had something worth holding on to. The days passed with a quiet intensity. Anna could feel the weight of each moment, the unspoken understanding between her and John growing stronger. Their brief encounters, those stolen moments of connection, had become the highlights of her otherwise monotonous days. She never thought she would find herself looking forward to the smallest of exchanges, but here she was, counting the days between their meetings. She knew they could not continue like this forever, but a part of her didn't want it to end. The feeling of being seen, of being treated like something more than just a prisoner, had changed her. She had begun to believe that perhaps there was still some humanity left in the world, even in the midst of war. One morning, as Anna was working in the garden, she felt the familiar presence of John nearby. She didn't have to look up to know it was him. His footsteps were different from the others, calm, purposeful. She glanced up and caught his eye. He was holding something in his hands, a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Without saying a word, he walked over to her. "I brought you something," he said, his voice low and almost apologetic. Anna raised an eyebrow, unsure of what to expect. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John smiled slightly and handed her the bundle. "It's not much, but I thought you might like it." Anna unwrapped it slowly, her fingers trembling. Inside, there was a small loaf of bread, some fruit, and a few slices of cheese. It wasn't much, but to her, it felt like a gift from another world. She looked up at John, her eyes wide with surprise. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know," he replied simply, "but I wanted to." There was a long silence between them, the weight of his words hanging in the air. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't necessary. They didn't need to say anything more. They both understood the significance of the gesture. In that small act, John had given her something she hadn't had in a long time: hope. The kind of hope that made her believe that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than this endless cycle of survival. She smiled at him, a small, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice full of gratitude. John nodded, his expression softening. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "We're in this together." Anna's heart skipped a beat. His words were simple, but they carried a weight that she could feel deep in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, with John standing before her, she realized that she wasn't as alone as she had once believed. She had found someone who cared, someone who saw her as more than just a prisoner. As the days went by, their connection deepened, though neither of them spoke of it. It wasn't necessary. They didn't need to put a name to what was growing between them. They had learned to find comfort in silence, in the small, meaningful exchanges that had come to define their relationship. John continued to bring her food, and with each visit, the bond between them grew stronger. They shared stories of their lives before the war, their hopes for the future, and the quiet moments of peace they had found in each other's company. But as much as they had found in each other, the world around them was still unforgiving. The camp was always watching, always waiting for the smallest sign of defiance. Anna knew that their connection could never be fully realized, not in this place, not in this time. But she couldn't help the way she felt. She had begun to care for him, deeply and without reservation. She had begun to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could exist in the most unlikely of places. One afternoon, as they sat together in the shade of a tree, sharing a moment of quiet, John looked at her with a seriousness that caught her off guard. "Anna," he said, his voice steady, "when this is all over, I want to take you with me. To America. You won't have to stay here." Anna's heart fluttered in her chest, but she held his gaze, unsure of what to say. She had never allowed herself to think of a life beyond the camp, beyond the war. But in that moment, with John's words hanging in the air, she couldn't help but imagine it. A life where she wasn't just surviving, but truly living. A life where she could be free. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know if she could believe in such a future, but for the first time, she wanted to. She wanted to believe that there was more than just war, more than just survival. She wanted to believe in hope. She wanted to believe in them. The days felt like they were blending together, one after another, in the heat of the Texas sun. The work in the camp had become a blur, the endless hours of labor under the watchful eyes of the guards, the constant struggle to survive. But Anna had begun to notice something in herself that she hadn't seen before: resilience. Each day, as she worked, she found herself pushing a little harder, reaching a little further, her body growing stronger. It wasn't just the physical work. It was the hope that John had planted in her. Hope that had begun to take root deep within her. She didn't know how long it would last, this quiet peace she had found within herself. But it was enough to make her wake up each day with the smallest of hopes that maybe, just maybe, things could change. John had kept his promise. He continued to bring her food, those small acts of kindness that kept her going. But it was more than that. He had become her anchor, the one person who made her feel like she was more than just a prisoner. He treated her with respect, with dignity, something that had become rare in this place. As the days passed, they found themselves growing closer, though neither of them spoke about it. They didn't need to. It was in the way they looked at each other when they passed by, in the quiet exchanges, in the unspoken understanding that grew stronger with each passing day. It was one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the camp settled into an uneasy silence, that John approached her again. This time, there was a different energy between them. It wasn't just about survival anymore. There was something more. Something she couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. "Anna," he said softly, his voice low and steady, "I know things are hard, but I've been thinking about the future." Anna turned to face him, her heart beating a little faster. She knew exactly what he was talking about. They had never spoken of it directly, but the promise had always been there, lingering in the air between them. "What about it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. John looked at her with those same eyes that had become so familiar to her, eyes that held kindness and understanding. "When the war is over," he began, his words filled with determination, "I want to take you with me. I want to give you a future, Anna. A real future. Not just survival." His words hit her like a wave, the weight of them sinking into her chest. She had never allowed herself to dream of a future, not beyond the war, not beyond the barbed wire fences that had kept her trapped for so long. But as she looked into John's eyes, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something more, something beyond the war. "You're serious?" Anna asked, her voice shaking. John nodded, his expression unwavering. "I'm serious. I'll find a way. I don't know how, but I'll make it happen. I'll take you to America. We'll start over. Together." The words hung in the air, heavy with promise, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Anna allowed herself to imagine it. A life outside the camp. A life where she wasn't just surviving, but living. A life where she could be free. She swallowed hard, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to rise. She didn't know how to respond. Didn't know if she could believe it. But in that moment, with John standing in front of her, she wanted to. She wanted to believe that it was possible. that they could have a future together. I want that, Anna whispered, her voice barely audible. I want to believe that we can have a future. But how do we know it will happen? How do we know the war will end? John reached out, his hand gently touching hers, grounding her. We don't know, he said, his voice steady. But we can't give up on the possibility. Not now, not when we've come this far. We found something worth fighting for, Anna. And that's all we need. She looked at him, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in so long. Hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that there was a way out. A way to escape the nightmare that had defined her life for so long. I believe you, she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. I want to believe in us. John smiled, his eyes softening as he squeezed her hand. Then that's enough, he said, his voice full of warmth. That's all we need. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of their words settling in the space between them. The camp, the war, the world outside. They all seemed distant now, like something far away, something they could almost forget. For the first time in a long while, Anna allowed herself to dream. She dreamed of a future with John, of a life beyond the walls of the camp, of a chance to start over. It felt impossible, yet, in that moment, it felt real. And that was enough to give her the strength to keep going. The days seemed to stretch on, each one blending into the next, yet Anna felt a quiet shift within herself. The warmth that had begun to bloom in her heart was slowly growing stronger. She had allowed herself to imagine a future, to believe in something beyond the barbed wire fences of the camp. John's words, his promise, had lit a spark in her that refused to fade. They met in secret when they could, each time more determined, more certain of the bond they were forming. But Anna was also aware of the dangers that came with this growing connection. The camp, despite its routine, was always a reminder of the risk they were both taking. One wrong move, one careless whisper, and everything could come crashing down. And yet, she couldn't help herself. Every time they spoke, every time their hands brushed, it felt like a small rebellion against the world they were trapped in. It was on a quiet afternoon that John's presence felt more urgent than before. The camp was unusually still. The usual noise of guards patrolling and prisoners working seemed muted, as if the whole place was holding its breath. Anna found herself walking toward the edge of the camp, the place where they often met. She didn't know why she felt the need to go there, but something told her to. She hadn't seen John for a few days, and though he had always been careful, there was a feeling in her chest that wouldn't go away. As she approached the familiar spot by the fence, she saw him standing there, waiting. His posture was different this time. He wasn't as relaxed as usual. His eyes scanned the area, and there was a tension in his shoulders that Anna hadn't noticed before. When he saw her, his expression softened, but there was a nervousness in his eyes that caught her off guard. Anna, he said, his voice lower than usual, I need to talk to you. She stopped in front of him, her heart beginning to race. What's wrong? She asked, her voice filled with concern. John looked at her for a long moment, his eyes searching hers as if trying to find the right words. I don't want you to worry, he said finally, though his words did little to ease the unease building in Anna's chest. But there's something I need to tell you. The tension in the air was thick, and Anna could feel her pulse quicken as she waited for him to continue. I've been asked to leave the camp, John said quietly, his voice barely a whisper. Anna's breath caught in her throat. Leave? She repeated, her voice shaking. What do you mean? I'm being transferred, he explained, his eyes still scanning the camp nervously. I don't know exactly when or where, but they've already started making arrangements. I won't be here much longer. His words hung in the air, the gravity of them settling over both of them like a heavy weight. Anna's mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. She had always known that the connection between them could not last forever, but hearing it out loud made the reality of their situation feel painfully clear. She had always feared this moment, but now that it was here, she found herself at a loss for what to say. But what about us? Anna asked, her voice trembling. What about the promise you made? John took a deep breath and stepped closer to her. He reached out, taking her hand in his, the familiar warmth of his touch offering a small comfort. I haven't forgotten, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll never forget. But we both knew this was always a risk. I can't stay here forever. And you can't stay here either. Anna's heart ached at his words. She knew what he was saying was true, but the thought of losing him, of never seeing him again, was too much to bear. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. John's hand tightened around hers. "You won't lose me," he said softly. "No matter what happens, we won't lose each other. I'll make sure of that." His words were a promise, but Anna knew they were promises made in a world full of uncertainty. She didn't know how they would ever be able to keep them, but for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that they could. "What do we do now?" she asked, looking up at him, her eyes searching for something to hold on to. John's gaze was steady, his grip on her hand firm. "We keep going," he said quietly. "We keep believing. And when the time comes, when the war ends, we'll find each other. I promise." The uncertainty of the future weighed heavily on Anna, but in that moment, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. No matter what happened, no matter where life took them, they had something worth holding on to. They had each other, and that, in this broken world, was enough. For now, it was enough. The weeks had passed with a quiet heaviness that neither Anna nor John could shake. They had both grown accustomed to the routine of the camp, the daily grind that kept them physically occupied but emotionally distant from the larger world around them. Yet, in the moments they shared, those brief exchanges in hidden corners or fleeting glances across the camp, there was a connection that neither of them could deny. Despite the uncertainty of their future, despite the fact that neither of them could make any promises beyond the next day, their bond had become something that gave Anna the strength to face another day. But even with the bond they shared, the reality of their situation had not changed. The war raged on, and the camp remained a constant reminder of the fragile line between survival and despair. It was early one evening when Anna found herself alone by the camp's outer fence. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the dusty ground, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to forget where she was, who she was, and simply feel the cool breeze on her skin. The sound of footsteps broke her reverie, and she turned quickly, her heart leaping in her chest when she saw John. He walked toward her with his usual quiet confidence, but this time, there was a look in his eyes that made Anna's breath catch. It wasn't the usual calm gaze she had grown used to. This time, his eyes held something else, something she couldn't quite place. "Anna," he said, his voice low, "I need to talk to you. It's important." Anna's heart began to race. She could tell by the way he spoke that something had changed. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John looked around quickly, checking to see if anyone was nearby. When he was satisfied that they were alone, he stepped closer to her. "I've been ordered to leave," he said, the words coming out quickly, as if he were afraid of what would happen if he said them too slowly. "I don't know when exactly, but it's happening soon. I'll be gone for a while." Anna's chest tightened at the words. "Gone?" she repeated, her voice trembling. "Where?" John shook his head, his eyes filled with frustration. "I don't know yet. I've been given orders, but the details are unclear. It's not the transfer I was expecting. It's something else. I can't explain it all, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." Anna's mind spun as she tried to process what he was saying. She had known, deep down, that their time together was limited. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing the urgency in his voice, made it feel real. She felt a lump form in her throat. "What does this mean for us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I promise you, Anna, I won't forget you. I can't promise what will happen next, but I'll keep my word. I'll find a way to get you out of here when this is over." Anna stared at him, her chest tight with emotion. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he would keep his promise, but the uncertainty of it all left her feeling hollow inside. "You're leaving," she said softly, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "I don't know if I can stand that." John reached out, taking her hands in his. "I'm not leaving you for good, Anna," he said, his voice full of determination. "I'm leaving, but not forever. I'll come back for you. You have to believe that." "I want to believe it," Anna whispered, her heart aching with the weight of his words. I don't know how to believe it when everything around us is falling apart." John looked at her for a long moment, his eyes full of the kind of sadness she had never seen before. "I know. This place, it's taking everything from us. But we can't let it take this too. We can't let it take what we have." Anna felt a tear slip down her cheek, though she hadn't even realized she was crying. She wiped it away quickly, not wanting him to see her weakness. But John reached up gently, brushing her cheek with his thumb, his touch soft and reassuring. "You're not weak, Anna," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're stronger than you know, and I'll come back for you. I promise." Anna nodded, her throat tight, but the words she needed to say wouldn't come. Instead, she wrapped her arms around him, holding him tightly, afraid that if she let go, he might slip away forever. John held her just as tightly, his grip firm, as though he was trying to anchor them both in that moment. They stood there, holding each other in silence, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the camp in a soft, golden light. It was in that moment, with the world around them still and quiet, that Anna knew one thing for sure. She would hold on to this moment, to this promise, for as long as she could, because it was all they had left. The days after John's departure grew longer, the weight of the promise he made hanging heavily over Anna. Each day, the hours seemed to stretch endlessly, the mundane tasks of camp life slowly eating away at her. There were still moments when she would catch herself smiling, remembering the way John had held her, the soft words he had spoken, and the quiet confidence in his eyes. But those moments were fleeting, quickly replaced by the cold reality of the camp. She had learned to bury her emotions deep, not allowing them to surface for fear that they would break her. But it wasn't easy. Every day without John felt like a day lost, a day closer to an uncertain future. The camp had become more oppressive in his absence. The guards seemed to watch her more closely, the other prisoners kept to themselves, and the constant buzz of whispers in the camp only made her feel more isolated. She tried to keep busy, focusing on her work, but it wasn't enough to silence the questions that kept swirling in her mind. Would John come back? Would she ever be free? And if she was, what would that freedom look like? Her thoughts were interrupted one afternoon when she saw a familiar face from across the camp. At first, she didn't believe it, but as the figure drew closer, the unmistakable outline of John's figure became clear. Her heart leapt in her chest, and she stood frozen, not sure if she was imagining things. John was walking toward her, looking tired but determined. The air seemed to stop for a moment, the world around her falling away as she focused on him. When he reached her, he didn't say anything at first. His eyes searched hers, as if looking for some kind of reassurance, or perhaps just the truth of her feelings. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but full of emotion. "I'm back," he said, the words heavy with meaning. Anna's heart skipped a beat, and she couldn't help but reach out, touching his arm to make sure he was real. "You're back," she whispered, unable to believe it. John nodded, the corners of his lips lifting into a small but genuine smile. "I promised I would be." She felt tears welling up in her eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She couldn't cry now. Not here, not in front of everyone. "But how?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How did you manage to come back?" John looked around, making sure no one was watching them. "It wasn't easy," he said quietly. "I had to make a lot of sacrifices to get back here. But I couldn't leave things like they were. Not with you. Not after everything we've been through." Anna didn't know what to say. Her mind was racing, trying to process the impossibility of the situation. She had convinced herself that she would never see him again, that the promise he made was just a fleeting wish in a world where promises often went unfulfilled. But here he was, standing in front of her, as real as ever. "What happens now?" Anna asked, her voice barely a whisper. John took her hand in his touch warm and steady. "Now, we take it one day at a time," he said softly. "But I won't leave again. I'm here for you, Anna. I'll make sure you're safe, and when the time comes, we'll find a way out of this place together." Her heart swelled with emotion as she looked at him. The uncertainty of the future still lingered, but for the first time in a long while, Anna allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something more, something beyond the camp. She knew that there would still be obstacles, challenges they would have to face together, but in that moment, with John standing beside her, she felt like anything was possible. "I believe you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I believe that we can make it out of here. Together." John smiled, his eyes filled with the same quiet determination that had first drawn her to him. "Together," he echoed, and for the first time since she had arrived at the camp, Anna felt like she could breathe again. The world outside might still be filled with uncertainty, but with John by her side, she knew they could face whatever came next. They had each other. and that was more than enough to give her the strength to keep going. Days continued to pass, the air thick with tension, yet Anna found herself clinging to the small threads of hope that had begun to weave themselves into her heart. John's promise to return, to find a way out of the camp, kept her going, even when the weight of the situation pressed heavily against her. She could feel it, the growing anticipation in the quiet moments between them, the unspoken understanding that something had changed. They had both crossed a line, one that could not be undone, and though they never said it aloud, it was clear. This was no longer just survival. This was about something more. Something they both wanted but weren't sure they could have. The guards were becoming more watchful, the whispers in the camp more frequent. Anna could sense it, the growing suspicion, the awareness that something was brewing beneath the surface. John's movements were more cautious, more calculated, and his visits to her were less frequent. They had to be careful. The camp was a tinderbox, and any spark could ignite the flame. But even in the silence, even in the moments when they were forced to keep their distance, Anna could feel John's presence in everything. His words, his promise, the way he looked at her. It was as if his touch, his words, had planted something deep within her that refused to wither, no matter the circumstances. It was late one evening when John came to her again. The night was cooler than usual, the air carrying a faint breeze that made Anna's skin prickle. She was walking alone, as she often did now, when she spotted him in the distance. His silhouette was faint against the darkening sky, but the way he moved, the steadiness of his pace, told her it was him. Anna's heart beat faster as he drew closer. This time, there was no need for words. She could see the determination in his eyes, and it was the same look he had worn the first time they met. Full of something that made her feel as if the whole world could fade away and they would still be standing together. "Anna," he said quietly, his voice low and urgent, "I've found a way." Her heart skipped a beat. She had heard those words before, and yet, hearing them now, in the midst of everything, made them feel like a promise she could finally hold on to. "A way," she repeated, not quite able to believe it. John nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "Yes, but it's risky. We'll have to move fast. The time to act is now." Anna felt the rush of adrenaline in her chest. "What do we have to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the wave of fear crashing against her. John stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. "There's a supply truck leaving tomorrow morning. It's making a stop just outside the camp, at a remote checkpoint. If we're quick enough, we can slip past the guards, hide in the back of the truck, and get out. It's the only chance we have." Anna felt a chill run down her spine. It sounded simple, almost too simple, but in this place, simplicity was dangerous. She knew that even the smallest mistake could cost them everything. "Are you sure this will work?" she asked, her eyes searching his for any sign of doubt. John met her gaze, his eyes unwavering. "I'm sure. But you have to trust me, Anna. This is our chance. If we don't take it now, we may not get another one." She swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling in her chest. She had to trust him. She had to believe that they could make it out, that they could survive. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Anna allowed herself to hope. "I trust you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. John smiled, the faintest glimmer of hope in his eyes. "We'll make it through this. Together." Anna nodded, her heart racing. Tomorrow could be the beginning of everything, or it could be the end. There was no way to know for sure, but in that moment, with John beside her, she felt like they had a chance. As the night wore on, they made their final preparations, the plan falling into place with eerie precision. The uncertainty of it all hung heavy in the air, but Anna held on to the belief that maybe, just maybe, they could escape this nightmare. Maybe they could have the future they had always dreamed of. Together.